It's 90s fantasy with a female author. What could go wrong? Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Wayfarer Redemption, book 1 in the Axis trilogy, or the overall Wayfarer Redemption series by Sarah Douglas. This is also known as, in the original one, it was published in Australia as just Battle Axe, which I think makes a lot of sense for the first book to be called that. And I don't know exactly why it was changed, but it does, yeah. Just being called Battle Axe for the main character Axis, and it's the Axis trilogy, makes sense. But yeah, I was excited to get to this one, and it's like I said, it's 90s female fantasy. It's got cool cover art, which is also just something that usually is a nice draw. But I got these and didn't really know a ton about them, and then ended up deciding to buddy read it with Dan from Discord, and then we had a couple people, including Marilyn from Discord and Fina from Fina Reads, join in as well. And so we had a very a mixed experience all between us. I think some really loved, some a little less so. I quite enjoyed this, but I also think it's a very flawed first entry in a series, but it's also very fun, and so that's kind of that's why I landed there. But I did really enjoy myself. So this one starts off with there's this really big prophecy, and there's reference to the Starman and the Destroyer and things that are happening. And the prologue of this book was absolutely wild. It makes it feel like it's going to be much darker and bloodier than it ends up really being, although there's quite a lot of action and intrigue and stuff in here. But the prologue was very wild and is related to the prophecy, and then we jump forward from there and see what's going on here. I think the summary of the book that's telling you what it's about also, I feel like, is super misleading to me, because it makes it sound like it's going to focus on a character Faraday, where this felt more like Axis, his book for the main character. And I think pretty much all of us agreed was probably our favorite character for the most part. But let's talk a little bit about this, and then I'll explain kind of where my issues are, and what it does well, and what I think it didn't do the best with. But we're following here several characters that are drawn up in this big thing that's happening. And so I'll mention Axis. He is the leader of the Battle Axes, which are a elite warrior group that's under the Seneschal, which is a kind of religious order. It's the Order of the Plow. And there's a lot of background there with specifically they cleared a lot of trees and that sort of thing. And very specifically, all of this stuff is relevant, which again, we'll talk world building. Not much of a surprise that I really did enjoy that. But he is the bastard son of Rivka, his mother, who had him shortly after having her firstborn Bornheld. And so they have this sort of, rivalry and hatred toward each other after all these years. And Duke Bornheld, who is a very important and high-ranking person as well, then becomes betrothed to Faraday, who's our third main character here. But she ends up traveling with Axis and his axe wielders as they're going, and then so it sets that sort of thing up. So I know that makes it sound immediately like this is just going to be like a romancy love triangle thing, and it's really not. It did seem like that at a point that it might go there, but it doesn't ever really focus on that too much at all. But it's the set there. But the real backdrop is this prophecy is coming true. The prophecy is alive and active in the land, and we have to worry about the Destroyer, Gorgrail, which just super cool name, by the way. I looked. There's surprisingly, I could not find any metal band called Gorgrail. Any variation of the spellings that I tried, it sounds like that needs to be a metal band. So if you're trying to start one, there you go. But really cool name. But there's the Destroyer is coming from the north. There's all this Winterland. There's these creatures that are going and killing people, and so the people need to then go and get in there. So Axis is on his way north to a fort up there with the axe wielders, and there's a lot of these things going on, and it starts off feeling a little bit, with the type of the Lord of the Rings, exploring. There's this weird silent woman forest is what it's called, and that type of thing. But then it goes a little bit more, I would say, toward the Eddings route. And I mentioned that specifically because I realized well after starting this, it says, an epic fantasy in the tradition of David Eddings and Terry Goodkind. And I'm like, wow, I don't know that you could give me a blurb that would normally make me less interested in a book, because don't care for either of those authors. But that's where we get into some of the things that I was less of a fan of, and that's the the idea of the prophecy, which I think prophecies are fun. This is the kind of book though where things are happening because of the prophecy. Events just kind of go, people do things, make decisions, things happen, and that's really why. And it's if we're talking about like, the prophecy is walking the land, it's spoken of almost like the prophecy is this actual entity that's controlling things, and that's something that Eddings did a bit in the Belgariad, although in a much more annoying and cheesy way, in my opinion. It didn't bother me nearly as much here, because I think there were other things for me to latch on to. So this is very plot driven and following that prophecy. And so the characters do come off as a little bit shallow. You do get a little bit more of them, but I feel like part of it is you don't get a lot of depth of character. And then when they just sort of make decisions because that's what's going to happen, it prevents you from getting in. So I think if you really need to latch onto characters in a really character focused read, this one might be a little bit of a struggle for you. With the lore and the world building, especially up front, was the big draw for me. And then it's just there's so much really cool plot elements and action and more lore that you get as you're going on, that's what really pulled me in. It's just it was really engaging and entertaining and a kind of a fun read, even though it's not one that I'm like really digging in and connecting with. This is a kind of like an entertainment series, so it's just doing all kinds of fun stuff. We have lots of action. It ramps up pretty big by the end of this first book, knowing that there's two trilogies, I think, at least, in this series, and so there's a lot more to come, and it ramps up pretty big to begin with, so that has me immediately curious. But I think if you are more on the side where you're fine with something that's plot driven, and you don't need the reasons, you're okay to just kind of enjoy the ride, I think this is going to work out much better for you. Me, I'm sort of in the middle, to be honest, because like I said, I tend to focus more on world building, and there was plenty of that to get me a draw in. But if you just world build and do nothing else, then a book's not really going to work for me. So I found, because I was interested in the world and I was entertained by the action and what was happening, that was enough for me to have a really good time with this still, even though the characters were not always not always making the most sense, and some of the stuff that happened was just like a little weird or convoluted or forced. And again, it's because the prophecy. And so I think that's a fine line to walk with it, and you have to be okay with that, because I have like the Belgariad, for example, which is one of my, like, the series is so notorious for me with the lazy way that it uses some of those elements and some other things that it does. I have a lot of complaints with that too, and granted, that's supposed to be more younger reading and this isn't, so maybe that's also part of it. But I think Sarah Douglas does a pretty decent job with that, and was still keeping things entertaining and gripping enough that you're pulled in and you're having a good time. My other nitpick, though, is there are a lot of weird naming conventions, both for like actual like people, like names or titles, places, months, things like that. And it is definitely a nitpick, and I feel like it becomes a little bit less prevalent, or maybe I just got used to it. But early on, it really did annoy me, and so I will bring it up because I know others were annoyed too. You have it with some names like Battle Axe is one word, but the B and the A are capitalized, and there's other things like that. There's different names that are just like capitalized like that with the two words mashed together. Like the axe wielders are like that too. Occasionally it has a dash though, but not normally. And like the months are like frost month, like, again, one word but with the each separate word capitalized, or snow month or ice month, things like that. And it was just kind of like some weird things that I thought were just a little bit strange. And it just, that part reminded me, the old trope about the weird naming and lots of apostrophes, which there wasn't a ton of, the like lots of apostrophes, but just the kind of the old joke where people just try too hard to make things fantasy. It does kind of come off that way. I don't really think that was necessary too much, but it was one of those things. Again, I was enjoying myself enough, having a good enough time with it, that it just didn't bother me a whole lot as well. And so I think that's ultimately, like I said, where I landed. I did enjoy this. I did give this 4 stars. It was at points I did wonder if it was going to be like 3.5 more, but I felt like it was a pretty solid 4 star, again, because it was entertaining. It had an interesting world I was curious to find more about, and I was just having a really good time reading it. It is that kind of book though, like I said, I think this is the, turn your brain off a little bit and just enjoy, because if you're trying to like dig in and like really find reasons for things, you're not going to. And if you're trying to like really see in-depth characters and character motivations, you're not probably going to find that either. But if you want just something that's really cool lore and world, really great action, and a plot-driven book, especially for, I feel like I don't talk about plot-driven books as much because I feel like, at least with what I read, it's less common that things are plot-driven, at least. Usually it tends to be more character-focused or world-focused. But so if you're the person who's like, hey, I really would like more plot-driven books, highly recommend this series because I think it's something I don't see a ton in fantasy that I read. So yeah, really, that is it. Those are my thoughts on this first book, The Wayfarer Redemption by Sarah Douglas, another author from the 90s that I've been curious to try, and a series that and now I have, of course, though, a bunch more books to get to in the series, so that's always the downside of this. But I had a good time with it. I am excited to find out more about it once I continue and go on from here. But that's really my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts on this one. So I know some of you have mentioned that you had read this when I said I was going to, so I'd be curious to see your thoughts down below, or if it's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely let me know. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. I'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.